Reports are tonight that the White House has revealed a proposal to extend legal status and create a path for citizenship for 1.8 million illegal immigrants brought into America when they were children. And that is the offer to the Democrats. And in return, the request is for $25 billion to help fund the wall, an across-the-board end to chain migration, and an end to the visa lottery program. Now, according to the proposal from the White House, it's about 17 years before chain migration actually ends. It's hard to imagine many of the senators will still even be alive, let alone in political power. And this bill basically gives amnesty to everyone who was eligible for DACA, including the million or more people who never bothered to sign up for it in the first place. And of course, it means that the unlawful executive action pursued by Obama has borne the demographic fruit that they prefer, which is, of course, that the vast majority of Hispanics, of Mexicans, vote for the left. And they're just importing voters because they can't convince Americans of their policies. It is cheating, and it is a democracide in many ways. Now, this is a huge gift and a win for the left, which means that they're going to hysterically spurn it and screw it up. And maybe that's the point. I don't know. It's hard to tell in this rotating carousel of political whodunit that's going on in the world at the moment. But the response from some groups has been predictably hysterical. Greisa Martinez Rosas, she's the Advocacy Director for United We Dream, I think it's a woman, and one of the potential beneficiaries of the DREAM Act, has said, "Let's call this proposal for what it is, a white supremacist ransom note." Let us be clear, she said. Any politician who backs up this ransom note is enabling Trump and Miller's white supremacist agenda. So just so everyone's clear, this is the reality if you're white in America. If you're white in the rest, here's the reality. If diversity continues to work the way that it's been working, you will never, ever stop being called a racist, a fascist, a neo-Nazi, a white supremacist, you name it. This will never, ever stop. See, here's the way that it works from a moral, logical standpoint. On the one hand, you see, the Mexican children brought over illegally by their parents get to keep citizenship. Though their parents committed a crime, they get to keep the proceeds of that crime. Although, of course, if you're Bernie Madoff's kids, you don't get to keep the proceeds of his crimes. So children, you see, are not at all morally responsible for the direct criminal activities of their parents. Not at all responsible, and in fact should be rewarded. On the other hand, the 3 or 4% of white people in America who owned slaves 150 years ago, well, every white person is responsible for that tiny sliver of possible ancestors a century and a half ago. See, that's the way it works. And just in case you're having trouble following the moral logic. Got it? The children of illegal immigrants are not morally responsible for their parents' direct criminal actions that gain them a huge benefit in the here and now. But white people are all responsible for a few white people owning slaves 150 years ago. See how that works? It will never make sense. It will never be logical. It will never be objective, and it will never be moral. The word racist, the phrase white supremacist, will always be used as a club to cow you into submitting and coughing up your resources for people who want them. It is a giant flashing button vending machine that people will pound with the battering ram of verbal abuse until you cough up your resources and your children's future. Nothing will ever be enough to end it. Nothing will ever be enough. Now, I actually started in my business career running a diversity newsletter for a major corporation and believed in the idea or the ideal of it a long time ago. If the word racist could be retired, if the phrase white supremacist could be retired, if this hysterical verbal abuse was not brought out and used to flay white people every single time there was a conflict of interest between ethnicities, then possibly it could work. However, the evidence that has accumulated over the past 100,000 years is that we're tribal. And the evidence that has accrued over the last 50 to 60 years, to some degree, is that the word racist will always be applied to white people and only to white people, and it will never stop. It will always escalate. The moment you don't give another ethnicity what they want, then you will be called a racist if you're white. And this will only escalate and only continue. Other groups are allowed to have in-group preferences, and are blacks and Hispanics and so on. You can have a Chinese American society and nobody bats an eyelid. You can have a Mexican or Hispanic advocacy group called La Raza, which literally means the race, and nobody bats an eyelid. But if you're white and you have any kind of in-group preference, you are a neo-Nazi, white supremacist, racist, and this will never stop. This will never stop. The ethnicities who apply these terms, which is a lot of them, do not seem to have the capacity for self-restraint, to understand that it's verbally abusive, to understand that it's ugly and it's destructive, and it is guaranteeing that diversity will dissolve into factional warfare. Guaranteed. You keep applying this term of verbal abuse against whites, every time whites have even a remote shred of in-group preference, it means that diversity can never work. And it means that it's a win-lose. And this is a great tragedy. I have given up expecting people to restrain themselves from the use of the word racist, except in really egregious and obvious situations. But it is such a tempting word for people to use. It is such a tempting term of often career-destroying verbal abuse to cow white people into backing down and surrendering any preferences that I suppose it is impossible to ask people not to use it. And this is a great challenge for the society that we live in. I cannot tell you the contempt that I feel for people who use the word racist loosely, for people who use the word white supremacist, for people who are trying to enforce the laws of their own country. You understand. Mexico has something in its constitution which says you can't mess with the demography of the demographics of Mexico. You try illegally immigrating into Mexico, you get prison sentences, you are banned from the country. It is very strict and very strong. And if the enforcement of the laws of America is opposed with white supremacist, then it is hard to imagine how there's any such thing as a country. Of course, if this goes through, then chain migration will continue. There'll be all these hardship exemptions. The courts will overturn it. See, I mean, this is the basic plan, you understand, of the Democrats, right? Is to say, well, we'll give you what you want later in terms of some wall, end of the visa lottery, end of chain migration. That's going to come later, but what we want is the path to citizenship right now. Now, that's going to cause a massive swarm of people coming across the border, thus pumping up the illegal immigration system, or the illegal migration patterns. And that means that there's going to be more capacity for people without voter IDs to go and vote in elections. And so what's going to happen is they'll offer you the stuff down the road. All the stuff that say Trump wants is going to be offered down the road. But then what's going to happen is the demographics are going to change to the point where the Republicans are going to be unable to win an election. And that's very, very clear. I mean, a lot of the states are hanging by a thread as it stands. So the left says, we'll offer you what you want down the road. You give us what we want now, and we will start basically tilting the election as it stands. Now, once they can tilt the election and get themselves elected, then they're simply never going to deliver on what they have offered to the Republicans, or they're simply going to repeal the laws that have been put in place. Walls can be torn down, restrictions on immigration can be torn down, more paths to citizenship can occur, and you get a swarm of people coming in from Central and South America. Endless waves, endless waves, endless waves, massive tax problems, language problems, congestion problems, housing problems, cultural conflicts, white flight, you name it. And that is the plan. Let us alter the demographics now, and we'll never need to fulfill on the promises we made. It's not even that subtle a plan. Donald Trump's a very smart man. Let's find out if he falls for it.